What is your relationship with tension? Do you have tense muscles? Do you get headaches? How about your speech? Do people ever tell you that you seem inflexible? Do you know someone who exhibits inflexibility? This is Soul Mechanics, practical tune-ups to be a healthy human, and I'm your host, Kate Foley. You cannot force a healing upon yourself. You cannot force your ego into submission. You cannot call upon an awakening. And also, I believe that you can't force yourself to forgive. That's not how it happens. An awakening, much like healing, is sort of its own entity, or at least there's a symphony of choices, perceptions, prayers, and aligned events that bring it all together. When you force your human hand on healing or spiritual awakening, it disappears. These are organic forces. They require allowing, not force. They're not rational. They don't answer questions. They're mysterious and evasive, and you know what? They should be. There really is a coordination going on between us and the divine. You may not even fully understand the coordination, but you don't need to. You're not supposed to. So many of us are stuck in needing to know all the answers. It's almost like Google has ruined our abilities to wait. We have so many answers at our fingertips that now we want answers to all of our mysteries. You can't Google why you're here on Earth. You can't Google your soul's purpose. But in my experience, the desire to know rather than to allow is becoming more and more common. I find myself wanting to know all the answers, and I know better. I was a science major in college. One of the first things I learned was the scientific method. I learned how to read a peer-reviewed journal and how to decipher fact from opinion. I learned how to critically think. This knowledge was reinforced in nursing school as well. So my educational background is pretty scientifically focused. It's interesting to me that we find ourselves in a time and an environment where we can't exactly decipher what information we can trust as factual. There are certain publications that are fundamentally scientific, but I think we've placed way too much emphasis on science as fact. People during the height of the COVID pandemic kept saying, follow the science. And people who had no training in science began to almost worship science as fact. Science has always been a study of theories. All science is based on theories. Time and time again, science has evolved because we keep making new discoveries. More is revealed, and it changes or expounds upon the previous theory. So why are we so stuck on needing facts? Does this have something to do with us becoming more rigid, needing one or the other, taking sides? Do we need facts to form opinions? Do our opinions even matter that much? Have you ever heard the quote, "You don't need to believe in the sun to delight in the morning light"? I think this quote highlights our need for a higher power, but we don't need to believe, necessarily, in order to experience its beauty and necessity. We just need to allow for it. The rational mind can create a rigidity that echoes through our cell tissue. Can you allow for mystery in your life without a linear explanation? Can you allow for awe and inspiration without analyzing it? My theory is that our health depends on this. Our bodies are made for movement and fluidity. I'm not just talking about running and walking and lifting your kids or doing yard work. I'm talking about movement all the way down to the tiniest particles. I'm talking about fluid emotions and mental states. When we stop allowing for life to happen, when we need explanations for everything, we're not allowing for mystery. We're not allowing. When we stop allowing, we become rigid. What do you think rigidity does to the body? You don't need a health education to imagine this. When you find yourself forcing an awakening or forcing your ego into submission, you may actually want to look at your relationship with control. How much do you try to exert control on your acquaintances, friends, family, and your own body? Do you have certain rules or expectations by which everyone around you has to abide? These rules won't be obvious to you. They might look like common sense. They might look like prudent and conventional wisdom. For instance, should everyone throw cheese away when it develops mold? Should everyone smile and respond when you say good morning? Should the man on the corner exhibit gratitude when you give him a $5 bill? Should everyone be quote unquote joyful and positive? Should no one complain about their troubles? Should everyone recycle? Should everyone adopt vegetarianism? These are expectations, judgments, and rules. They're idealistic. There are consequences to idealism. None of us live in an idealistic world. It's very controlling and rigid to expect your ideals from the rest of the world, and it severely impacts your health. Think about it this way. Your rigid belief systems will create rigidity in your body. Rigidity and bodies don't correspond well. Our bodies, similar to the Earth, are roughly 60% water. Water is not rigid unless it's frozen. Our bodies die when frozen. When you want to heal or overcome a time in your life that's frustrating, and you begin to look at your own life and perceptions, you might also realize that radical shifts need to take place. But these shifts cannot be forced. Some shifts can be forced, but overall, we have to work with natural forces. And nature doesn't operate on our timeline. Sometimes we're supposed to sit with discomfort for months or even years. You cannot force a healing or movement in your life because you're uncomfortable or impatient. Also, just because you're uncomfortable does not necessarily mean that something is wrong. Your discomfort might be the very impetus needed to initiate a shift in your life. Discomfort can be a wonderful motivator for change, and sometimes it sticks around for a while. I have a very rigid body. I've been studying Tai Chi for over 4 years. My Tai Chi master is constantly giving me Qigong exercises and stretches to help me to become more fluid. My rigidity is also embedded in my thought patterns. I could go into where my rigidity comes from, but it kind of doesn't matter at this point in my life. We can look at the origin of any pattern that plagues us, or a pattern we simply want to change. But looking at the origin isn't going to change the pattern. Looking at the origin helps us to understand why, and maybe how the pattern came into being. But to change the pattern requires us to be present to our current circumstances. How do your current relationships look? What do you think about them? Do you have expectations from the people who you love? Do you resent them for canceling plans? Do you expect them to take your advice? Should they call you every week or every day? How about your thoughts? Do you feel a sense of urgency? Are you comfortable? Do you like what you see in the mirror or around you? Take a moment and follow the feeling in your chest, your stomach, or your pelvis. What are they telling you? The world is our mirror. So what you see in the world is your subconscious fears and desires being reflected back to you. Maybe it's frustrating and triggering, but you can tell what's going on with yourself on a deeper level by the people who are attracted to you, the conversations you're having, driving interactions on the road, your repeating emotions and thoughts. Again, the world is our mirror, showing us what we need to see, showing us unconscious patterns. When you begin to see and accept this, accountability seems like a natural state rather than some external punishment. Rigidity shows up in our interactions, and if we're vigilant enough, we can trace this back to ourselves and change it, and soften it. Our lessons come in paradoxes. When you feel most broken and isolated, oftentimes that's when you need to go deeper into your brokenness and isolation. The theory here is that you need to see what's broken. You can't fix a broken bone without knowing what bone is broken. What happens if you have a broken bone and you don't evaluate it? What happens if you ignore it and just hope it goes away? The bone mends most of the time, but it mends deformed. And from that point, your entire gait changes. You begin to develop compensations for the bone deformity and weaknesses in that new junction, as well as weaknesses in other areas. My point here is that any perceived brokenness or weakness or dysfunction in your life requires some evaluation. We all have the tendency to want to turn away from the discomforts in our lives, but that's just delaying the inevitable. When we turn away from our pain, we are essentially creating a deformity. There'll always be more to unpack later on. You may have to return to the injury and re-break that bone, and it might be more painful than the initial injury. But it's always your choice to deal with it now or later. Our challenges are what illuminate our strengths. Our supposed weaknesses are relative to who perceives them as weaknesses. Sometimes, our most feared weakness turns out to be our greatest strength. One of my weaknesses is my obsessive nature, but my obsessive nature has also made me hyper-focused. So it depends on the situation as to whether you think my obsessiveness is a strength or a weakness. My obsessive nature is certainly a challenge for me, and it pulls me away from being in the present moment. Once I become aware of it, I can utilize it as a tool to bring me back to the present. I have to be vigilant to the obsessive thoughts, though. That's where practice comes into play. What's an obsessive thought? It's a thought that spirals around and around in my head. It might be a thought attached to an insecurity like, I know I've gained weight since I ate that bag of potato chips. I wonder when that's going to show up on my waist. But I'm craving potato chips again tonight. What happens if I eat another bag of potato chips tonight? What will that do? How many bags of potato chips can I eat in a 2-week period before my pants get tight? Why am I craving so much salt and fat? Why can't I stop this craving? When will this stop? This is a particular spiral that has nothing to do with anything. It's a senseless spiral. It's always uncomfortable. It's a waste of mental energy. What alerts me that I'm obsessively thinking? My discomfort. When I feel a sinking feeling in my stomach, I know obsessive thinking is somewhere in the vicinity, and it's time to be still and present to my discomfort, not the obsessive thought. When we judge anything as positive or negative, we are ultimately creating rigidity in our bodies. After all, what's negative? When we judge something as negative, are we setting an expectation for the opposite? Have you ever been around someone who demands positivity and joyful expression? If you have you ever felt like you were being corralled into a little box of their making? Aren't any expectations a little rigid? I'm not advocating for emotional anarchy here. I'm just suggesting that we let go of some of our own rigidity with our expectations of humanity. We aren't directly hurting anyone by our expectations of them, but we are paving the way toward rigidity within ourselves. When you want to let go of something, when you want to stop being so rigid, it isn't about getting rid of the rigidity. It's about loosening the grip. Think about a clenched fist. When you open your hand, you're letting go of the rigidity. It's just a decision followed by a soft movement. Again, letting go isn't about eliminating something from your life. It's about lightening the grip or not focusing on it so much. The rigidity is always there. It's always an option. You can always return to it. But when you want to let it go, you just loosen the grip. Here's a paradox for you. When you desperately want something like letting go of an attachment, it strengthens that attachment. You want so dearly to let it go or get rid of some negativity from your life. But if you can maybe even embrace it first, take a look at how this rigidity has served you, thank it. Then, after appreciating it, loosen your embrace, and it falls away. Letting go isn't something you have to work hard at doing. It dissipates when we gaze softly at it, when we don't judge it, when we pull our energy back from the attachment, from the idea that we have to let go, from the idea that we need to get rid of something from our lives. Just pull back your intense focus. Speak to yourself in kind words. Place your hand on your chest and say, "Hey, it's okay. I don't have anything to do. I don't have to be anything. I don't have to let go of anything. I am as I am, and everything is okay." Your rigidity and discomfort subside as you accept them and yourself as you are. This is Kate Foley. Thank you for listening.